What's up, AP Psych? Welcome back. We're on Unit 8, Motivation, Emotion, and Stress, and we're on our final topic of work and achievement motivation. We're going to go through that and talk about the different things that motivate us to get work done and the different jobs we have. So let's jump right in. First, we'll start with talking about attitudes towards work, and then we'll move into achievement. So people have different attitudes towards work, and some take it as several different things, right? So you have a job, which is a necessary way to make money. Some people consider it a career, your opportunity to advance from one position to another. You can move up, right? It's what you're going to do for your lifetime. And others consider this a calling, right? You have a fulfilling job. You're in a fulfilling career. It's a socially useful activity. You feel value in it. And so you really enjoy what you're doing, right? Many of you right now have a job. You're out there working, making money to pay like car insurance, pay for gas, whatever it is. Just have extra spending money for your friends. But hopefully, none of you have found your career or calling yet, right? You're still too young. You're still trying to work that out. You need to figure out what you want to do with your life. So as you move throughout your life, many people find a career, but unfortunately, not as many find callings, right? It can be hard to find that totally fulfilling job or career that you think is really useful and you're actually making a difference in the world. So those are three levels. Within those levels, if you have a career or a calling, you could experience flow, right? Or even when you're doing schoolwork, if it's a class that you really enjoy, you might have experienced flow as well, or an activity that you do, whether it's painting or reading or things like that, or even playing sports. Flow marks immersion into one's work or a passion for one's work, and you become like completely involved and focused in your work. Okay. This kind of pairs with our optimal arousal theory in the sense that it's right in the middle between no work, where you're under engaged, and too much work, where you're over engaged and you're over anxious. When you're hitting right in the middle and something that you enjoy doing, and it's the perfect amount of engagement, you could enter this flow state. And people who flow in their work, oftentimes it's artists, dancers, composers, but anybody can reach it, right? They're less driven by extrinsic rewards like money, praise, and promotion, and they're more driven by intrinsic rewards. They enjoy what they're doing. So they kind of lose themselves in their work. And all of a sudden you look up and it's 2 hours later and you're like, wow, I didn't even realize time went by like that. Right. So when I'm like planning different and looking for different activities for you guys in class and things like that, I could be clicking through different resources, looking around, putting things in order and things like that. And all of a sudden I look up and it's like 2 hours later. I'm like, man, I just didn't waste, but 2 hours flew by because I was in that flow state trying to plan and figure out things for AP Psych class. In addition to just the work and the flow, there's organizational psychologists who look into how people are motivated at work. So if you're an industrial and organizational psych, you look into the structure of work environments as well as the behavior of management to see how those impact workers and influence their motivation, satisfaction, and productivity, right? So that's what an industrial organizational psych does. And all of that relates to achievement motivation. Okay? So all of these things about work, they correlate and relate to achievement. And it's defined as a stable learned characteristic in which satisfaction is obtained by striving for and attaining a level of excellence. So achievement motivation is all about achieving a certain level of excellence and getting there and feeling like you've done something important or worth recognition. B.F. Skinner devised a daily discipline schedule, which led him to become, one of the 20th century's most influential psychologists, right? So he was highly achievement motivated. He kept himself to a strict schedule because he had things that he wanted to do and he wanted to feel like he'd reached this level of attainment and excellence. So achievement motivation has two different levels to it. There's people with high achievement motivation, and these type of people tend to choose challenging tasks, yet tasks that can be completed successfully, right? So they're going to avoid situations which would come too easily, as well as those which would be unlikely for them to succeed in, right? They set realistically challenging goals, things that they can realistically achieve and move on from, right? Which is a really healthy way to look at things. They don't want to take on things too easy because it's not going to scratch their itch of achievement, right? It's going to be too easy. But they're not going to take on things too hard because they know they won't achieve it and they have this need for achievement. So they're going to set realistically challenging goals, which is a great way to look at life. On the flip side, there are people with low achievement motivation. Um, and low achievement motivation, those people tend to be motivated primarily by a desire to avoid failure. So these people are going to choose very easy tasks, which most people could complete, anyone could complete, right? Or extremely difficult tasks, which most could not successfully complete. So if they chose a super difficult task and they didn't complete it, it's not a threat to them because they can say, well, nobody did it, right? So really, their prime motive is to avoid sticking out, right? They don't want to be singled out for a failure or anything like that. They want to do easy things that they can achieve or super hard things that no one can achieve because they don't want to be singled out for it. So they avoid those moderate tasks because they're afraid they might fail at something in which someone else completes successfully, and then they don't fit in, right? So those are people with low achievement motivation. So how do we measure achievement motivation? Well, going back to something we talked about in our first unit when we talked about psychoanalytic theory and projective tests, there's thematic apperception tests. People are shown an ambiguous photo, such as the one here, and they're told to write a story about what's happening in the picture. Okay, and a standard scoring system is then used to determine the amount of achievement imagery, whatever that means, in the people's stories, right? And they showed a need for achievement, which is measured as NACH, either being high or low, right? So if you wrote a story about what's happening here, determining based on what you say in your story, a psychologist would rate that story and give you a level or need for achievement as high or low. Right, so that's one way to measure it. So when do we learn these achievement motivations? It tends to be learned in early childhood, particularly from your parents, which makes sense, right? I mean, our parents have some of the most, like the biggest influence on our lives as young people and how we grow up and who we grow up to become. So high achievement motivation stems from parents who do certain things, 4 things. They encourage their child to try new and difficult tasks, right? Tasks that are achievable, but push you a little bit, right? And then they give praise or other rewards for success for completing those tasks. Okay? What we call that there, a new and a difficult task that pushes you is just above, it's just in your zone of proximal development, right? It's just above your skill level, but you can push your skill level to get there and you can grow from it. Okay? And then they encourage their child to find other ways to succeed rather than just complaining about failure. So when their child does fail, they ask questions like, okay, well, how can you move forward from here? What can you do instead next time in order to succeed at this event or this task, right? And they kind of help their child grow in that way. And once they complete those new and difficult tasks and they give them rewards, hugs, kisses, success, whatever, they prompt their child to go on to the next more difficult challenge, right? And they keep pushing their child to achieve, but doing it in a healthy way, right? So that's how we kind of learn achievement motivation. And if parents don't do these things, you could be raising a kid with low achievement motivation, especially if you criticize them or talk about their failures and focus on them and things like that. How else is achievement motivation learned? Cultural influences can also impact our level of achievement. Um, Early in life, things as simple as children's books. When you think about Dr. Seuss, or The Places You'll Go, or The Little Engine That Could, I think I can, right? Or you're gonna go far in life. You're gonna do big things, right? These themes we learn as children push us to be highly achievement motivated. But there's also the value society places on achievement. So when we think about the United States is a high achievement motivation society, right? People value work and working hard and pushing yourself to be better. And there's always been that idea of the American dream in the United States, right? You can pull yourself up by your bootstraps and become the person that you want to be if you work hard enough, right? So that society pushes us towards high achievement motivation as well. So what kind of things actually do motivate us? Outside of our parents and things like that, there are 2 types of specific motivation. You have intrinsic and extrinsic. Okay, so intrinsic motivation is when you do something because you enjoy it and it's personally satisfying, right? In this instance, you're more likely to work harder, persevere, and produce higher quality work if motivation is intrinsic. On the flip side, you have extrinsic, when you do something because you want a concrete, tangible reward. Okay, this can actually be detrimental and undermine quality and performance because you're not doing it because you love it. You're doing it because you want to get it done for a specific reason. So this applies to all of us, right? Think about you and yourself in school. those subjects that you love and you're super interested in, you're intrinsically motivated by it, and the work that you have to do for it doesn't seem like work because you really enjoy it. You can take some people in psych class, right? There's some people in class who do all the notes, vocab, reading guides, organization and review guides, and they do it and they love it. And there are those people that do exist because they just enjoy psychology and learning more about it. On the flip side, some of you may be taking AP Psych class for, okay, it's an AP class. I want to get the grade boost. I want to get a 3.45 on the AP test so I can get college credit. All those things are extrinsic motivators. Not saying that you won't be as successful as people with intrinsic motivation. There's plenty of extrinsic motivated students who've come through AP Psych and gotten 4s and 5s and college credit and done a great job. But that information is less likely to stick with you, and maybe not as much long-term learning as people who are intrinsically motivated by a topic or a subject. So it applies to a lot of different areas in our life. School is just one example. So in addition to this idea of intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation, there was a study in the 1970s by Lepper, Green, and Nisbet, and they discovered something called the overjustification effect, which is a little bit of an abstract concept, and it kind of runs contrary to what you would think would happen, but it shows you the importance of intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. So in this study, they had the first condition, or the first group, an experimental group here, known as the expected award condition. And these were children who were told they would receive a reward for partaking in an activity they were previously doing out of pure intrinsic interest. So these kids, let's say it's reading. These kids were reading because they loved it. And then they told this group of kids, okay, well, when you finish reading that book, you're going to get a seal and a ribbon. You're going to get a reward. Okay? In the second condition, the unexpected award group, these children were not told they would receive an award until after they finished the activity, but they would receive an award. They just didn't know it. And the third group was the control group. It was the no reward condition. And the researchers did not tell or give the children any reward. This group served as the control group, since extrinsic reward were not involved before or after the performance. So all of these kids were intrinsically motivated to say, let's say read, right? They loved it and they did it because they loved it. Now we're going to see the impact of rewards or extrinsic motivators on that activity. Okay. Researchers, when they gave the children certificates based on their condition group, in the following phases, the researchers let the children go about their activities, about their day, but this time without offering or giving any rewards. So now they're saying, all right, we've done this example where we've given two groups rewards for their reading and one not. Next time, we're not going to give any rewards and see what happens. So the children in the expected reward condition became less interested in their activities since the introduction of the extrinsic motivation. So what they found is when you introduce an external incentive, like a reward, that actually decreases a person's intrinsic motivation to perform a particular task and becomes the overjustification effect. So what they're saying is these kids loved reading and they were doing it all the time. But once they got rewarded for it, they actually stopped reading, right? Because they didn't like it as much anymore because that reward had taken over and taken place of their intrinsic motivation, which is interesting. So when you're talking about, some people really love doing particular tasks or jobs or things like that, but when they're paid for it, all of a sudden they hate it, right? And they don't want to do it anymore because they don't feel that intrinsic love because the overjustification effect has occurred, which is just kind of an interesting study and interesting revelation in psychology. So our last topic is motivational conflict. And there's many different motives and many possible outcomes. And we come into conflict with one another in these decisions that we have to make when we're talking about what we want to do in life. So there's 4 types of basic motivational conflict. We have approach, avoidance, approach-avoidance, and multiple approach avoidance. Okay? Think of approach as a good thing and avoidance as a negative thing. Okay? So our first example, approach conflict. This is when you have to choose between 2 equally attractive options, which makes it difficult, right? You can either go to a movie with friends or go to another group of friends' birthday party. And let's say you want to do those 2 things equally. They're equally as attractive to you. As the importance of the choice increases, so does the difficulty in making the choice, right? So let's say you up the ante and it becomes two choices that are even more enticing. It makes it even more difficult for you to make that choice because it's hard to choose between two good things, right? That's approach conflict. Then you have avoidance conflict. And this is where you have to choose between two equally unattractive options, right? You got to clean the house or you got to go outside and mow the lawn, right? This is very difficult to resolve and often creates intense emotions because you don't want to do either one, right? So when your parents tell you you have to do chores and you're like, man, I don't want to do either one of those things. Like, no, right? So if you're choosing, so for example, like choosing between declaring bankruptcy or selling your family home, right? Two terrible choices. You don't want to do either one, which makes your decision very difficult. Then you have approach avoidance conflict. They're both appealing and negative aspects to the decision that you have to make. So you have one decision to make, but there's kind of like pros and cons to it, right? Which makes it difficult. So you have this situation where going to a dream concert, but you're invited by that annoying friend. Like everybody has that annoying friend where you're like, yeah, we're friends with you, but man, you like really annoy us, right? So you want to go to this concert. It's like your dream band is there playing, but your annoying friend is the one who has tickets and you couldn't get tickets. And they're like, hey, I got an extra one. You want to come with me? So you're like, man, I could see my favorite band ever, but then I got to sit by this person all night and they're just going to talk to me and it's going to be terrible, right? So it's difficult to resolve and often results in long periods of indecision because you're like, man, I really want to do it, but this part about it sucks. So it makes it really, really tough for you to make the decision. And in the end, you have multiple approach avoidance conflict when one has to choose between both attractive and negative aspects of several available alternatives. Okay, so here's some examples. You have two potential dates. You have to choose one to go on. One is good looking, but it's kind of a boring person, right? It's personality versus looks, right? And one is fun. You like a personality, but they're kind of short. So no offense to short people out there. Or you have two job options and one is far away, but you're going to make money, but you got to drive an hour, which is never fun, right? And one is, 10 minutes down the road, but there's no room for advancement. So you're not going to move up. You're not going to feel fulfilled. You're not going to make maybe extrinsically as much money as you could with the other job. So you have to choose between multiple situations with pros and cons to them. It's difficult to resolve because it may be hard to compare the features of each option. So you could be stuck trying to make the decision for a long time. Okay. So this wraps up our work and achievement motivation notes. We'll talk more about all these different examples in class and run through some activities. So let me know if you have any questions.